wait, give me. Can I? I can't really hear you though.
I'm not talking. That's
Oh,
why.
all right, perfect. I thought maybe I could hear some background noise, but you got that fucking noise gate on lock, dude. Holy shit.
I know. Hello, and then oh yeah, that's Frankie in the back. She says hey.
What happened? Didn't you
Uh,
used to have a dog? You had a greyhound, no?
that was a few years ago.
Yeah.
He's with different folks now, but no, I got Frankie. She's wonderful.
Yeah, you're a cat person. Okay, that's a L, but it's fine.
I mean,
We'll live through it.
I would say that I switch hit.
Yeah, you're
I think
verse.
that's
You're
how I put it.
verse. You go
Yeah,
between
exactly.
cats and dogs. I respect
Right.
that.
So I
All
was
right.
actually thinking
What?
for some of the Pelosi stuff, I had an idea to maybe do a little bit of deja vu with some of with some of your people on
I
stream,
love that.
and I had some stuff to share
I
to
love
sort of
that.
talk about a little bit with why Nancy has decided to flirt with the idea of World War III, which I got to say, as Brendan has said, was a terrific marketing stunt for Blowback season 3.
Yeah, no, I think she's doing that specifically for that. Which, by the way, that's why Noah's here, ladies and gentlemen. Noah's here to promote Blowback season 3, and also to promote the glorious, wonderful, and only true Marxist-Leninist ideology, the Jusha. Marxist-Leninist Jushaist Noah Kulwin is here to promote the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the true Korea, which is what the Blowback season 3 will be covering. You might remember him from his promotions on Blowback season 1 and Blowback season 2, which were on the Iraq War and also on Blowback season 2 was on Cuba, right? And Cold War, that era.
Yeah. We the first season was sort of like the Iraq war for, I think Brendan and I had grown up with it, but for a lot of the people who've listened to the show, it was a way to bring it back out of the memory hole, as we said. And then for season 2, we decided to just tell a totally different version of the story than the one that Americans get about Cuba. And for season 3, the Korean War is sort of commonly described as the forgotten war, and that's not a particularly impressive moniker to me or Brendan. In fact, it's kind of racist and sort of marginalizes the scope of what American policy was. What we did there, what we ourselves, American troops, did, and what we supported in the government of South Korea. And it's actually like last season,
genocide.
last year when the Cuba episode came out, there were some protests on the island, and now with this year coming out, with the season 3 coming out, one of the big events of our story is the General Douglas MacArthur during the Korean War, like, flies to Taiwan, and it becomes like it's nuclear war is on the table, and it's it's 70 years later, I suppose, and
They're doing it for you,
Pelosi,
I think. They're out. You can be honest. Are you
I
communicating with the
it's
Democratic Party?
I've decided that actually reality since 1917 has just been an ARG from Lenin. That's it.
Okay. Because it's just these coincidences. I'm noticing them. Okay. I'm noticing a lot of these coincidences. Shit keeps popping up mysteriously as you drop long and comprehensive explainers on. I mean, the way I describe your podcast is like if Dan Carlin's Hardcore History was made by cool dudes with good opinions rather than Dan Carlin. Is that a good way to describe it? I don't know.
I mean, I've never listened to Dan Carlin's show, but I've heard a lot of people I know and who listen to our show also like that one. So I'm not going to say anything untoward, but I do think that, like, I saw somebody post like that they thought that we were like doing sort of like the leftist Ken Burns, and that we're integrating Korean perspectives and American perspectives, and I thought that felt like, well, I a lot of people watch Ken Burns stuff, so I have that aspiration, and I also like to think that, yeah, like, we're trying to tell a pretty comprehensive story in that way. And then as a style, we really try to work to integrate a lot of archival Brendan and I research and produce and score. I mean, he scores and edits to everything, but like it's the two of us, and we have some help. We've had a tremendous like archival assistant, a fact checker, and we had somebody help out editing Brendan this season. But it really is like it's the two of us. And so we research and do a lot of the work and kind of constructing how we, I guess, go about it is just in trying to find a lot of ways that rocks that mainstream people haven't turned over before in a lot of cases, and just trying to present it in a really compelling and accessible way, in a way that doesn't sound like anything that people have heard before. And Brendan gets all the credit in the world for that, like literally originally scoring it, getting live string instruments and everything. I mean, it's like it's if you guys like if you're streamers, I guess they're probably too young to know John Carpenter movies, but Halloween, that recent reboot that they did, they're still doing. There was originally a movie called Halloween. It's great. It's by John Carpenter, and he also scored a lot of his own movies. And Brendan is like John Carpenter. So that's where I was going with that. And yeah, I mean, it's been like we're releasing it through supporting cast, which is means that people are directly supporting us. And if you go to blowback.supportingcast.fm, then you get the whole season at once, and ad free, and you also get some bonus extra music stuff, and you get full archive of the show ad free. And later on, at a certain point, we will be making the main episodes from this season free. But please subscribe and support us so we can continue to make the show.
All right, perfect. And you wanted to come on, like I said, to potentially talk about North Korea, but also talk about Nancy Pelosi going to Taiwan. We can get started on this before you show a video by just like playing a newsreel real quick while I go pee on the matter. NPR has been all over this coverage, which I think, and has used like very interesting terms that you normally would not see from the otherwise very neutral organization, right? They keep saying that the PLA and the Chinese response to Nancy Pelosi's, totally innocent trip to Taiwan is, as a matter of fact, belligerent. I heard NPR use the term belligerent more times this morning as I was looking at the coverage of the or the news perspective on Nancy Pelosi's potential trip. It was awesome. It was awesome to see that. But let's hear from everybody. Biden administration officials are discouraging House Speaker Nancy Pelosi from visiting Taiwan.
House Speaker
I'm going to
Nancy
play this
Pelosi.
really quickly. You can watch it on the stream while this plays as well, Noah. And I'm going to go pee real quick, and I'll be back in a second. Hold on. Sorry. I'm a bad streamer.
She's in Singapore today, kicking off her Asian tour as questions swirl over a possible stop in Taiwan. Now that has fueled some tension with Beijing. The Biden administration has discouraged her from visiting Taiwan, but it's still unclear if the House Speaker will make that stop anyway. ABC's Deputy Political Director, Avery Harper, joins me live now for more on this. Avery, what is on Pelosi's agenda for today?
Well, it's important to note that the details of this trip are pretty scant. There are no reporters traveling with the Speaker of the House on this trip, but we do know that she is slated and expected to meet with the President and the Prime Minister of Singapore, also some cabinet members there, and that she is expected to attend a reception of some sort with the American Chamber of Commerce in Singapore.
Now, China's foreign ministry spokesperson is warning the House Speaker against visiting Taiwan. She says that they will, quote, take firm and strong measures to safeguard national sovereignty and territorial integrity. So what exactly does that mean, and what would the implications be of this potential visit?
Well, this really has to do with what's called the One China policy. That is the American stance in that Taiwan believes it's independent. China believes that Taiwan belongs to China. We deal with the Chinese.
Yeah, and America also believes that Taiwan belongs to China, but not Nancy Pelosi, apparently. Sorry, I just wanted to butt in, but I mean, they just admitted that.
Officials diplomatically at this point. And so there are concerns on the part of some of these Chinese leaders that this sort of trip would be a provocative move. Now, earlier today, we heard White House spokesman John Kirby say that this is not a provocative move, that Congress folks have gone to Taiwan, and that Congress folks and every other sort of American leader should should be able to go to Taiwan without the threat or being fearful of China's rhetoric on this.
All right. And I want to shift gears a little bit. The Democratic economic package that's focused on climate change and
okay, they're shifting gears to the climate change economic package. So let's try to comprehend what the fuck's going on, Noah. What the fuck is going on? Why is Nancy Pelosi trying to go to Taiwan? What? And also, before we even get to that, for those who are uninitiated, why would you say this is a controversial trip? Oh, you're muted, by the way. You muted yourself. I can't hear you. You're muted. Noah!
Muted now.
Oh, okay.
So basically, your streamers, your viewers probably can't see they can't see this close up, but this is an
No,
LA
I'm gonna make it larger. Hold up.
From 1992. I mean, the text isn't, so it's a little blurry, but basically, this news article is about 30 years old, and this is about President George H.W. Bush. So I'll read from the beginning of the article here. President Bush moved Tuesday to renew China's trade benefits in the United States, once again rejecting suggestions that he make the one-year extension conditional on improvements in Chinese policies on human rights, arms sales, and trade. Now, it goes on to say, the action sets up a new election year battle in Congress over the administration's policy of preserving a working relationship with the Chinese government, despite its bloody 1989 crackdown, the Tiananmen Square incident. And so then Rep. Nancy Pelosi, D. San Francisco, a persistent critic of Bush's China policy, noted that Bush's action came almost exactly 3 years after military suppression of the Chinese democracy movement. Quote, the president is giving the Beijing authorities an anniversary present of $15 billion in trade benefits, she said. So just as like a way to start, this is to say that, and I'm not the only one to have noticed this, Politico has an article here about how, Pelosi has for a long, long time, sort of gone aggressively against, she really, really hates PRC. She has been very sympathetic to Taiwan, but really she has, spent a large part of her career, being critical of the Chinese government. And this is, precedes her tenure as Speaker of the House. And simultaneously, in 2007, she also went to Syria and was, trying to sort of, position herself as this sort of foreign policy maverick, maven. And it was sort of position against the Bush administration, meeting with Bashar al-Assad. And, none of which isn't saying so much, I think, about the Syria policy, so much as, Pelosi has for many years wanted to position herself as a kind of, foreign policy heavyweight. And part of the way that you do that as a member of Congress is to go visit places. And
yeah, I'm afraid I'm gonna have to stop you here for a second, but you're being quite misogynistic, Sweaty, for saying that Pelosi is sticking her nose where it does not belong. A woman can and should be able to engage in foreign policy.
Excuse me.
And also, create foreign conflicts with the largest superpower in the world if she chooses to.
I mean, look, it's, she's also taking a cue from somebody that we talk about in our season of Blowback right now, which is Douglas MacArthur, who literally in the middle of the Korean War took a flight to Taiwan, then called Formosa, and, he's declaring his affinities and his sympathy for Chiang Kai-shek. And he is doing all of this as a part of, as an outright, international geopolitical provocation. Because although the Chinese Civil War had just ended, and although the communists had won, there were still huge political heavyweights. Some of the biggest policy debates of that day were just largely around what was called the China lobby, the people who were agitating on behalf of Chiang Kai-shek, on behalf of the people then in Formosa, and doing whatever they could to reignite a war with China. Even though that would have led to World War III. So those were the stakes then, and they've just sort of been put in, stasis or like in a kind of stalemate in the years since.
Yeah. I mean, this is. I just don't understand what the timing of this is for now. I don't understand why Nancy Pelosi has decided to take matters into her own hands.
So there's a good I think like thing to also keep in mind here, because you're very right about this, which is that, and these articles are about the same news conference, and the VOA is the U.S. government funded
Yeah.
is the U.S. government funded press outlet, and they're really clearly trying to telegraph that they do not want anything to be taken the wrong way. I was looking earlier at their website, and yeah, they're still like they have Visit Singapore, but they don't have anything about her going to China, and, or to Taiwan or China, and so, the Biden White House clearly does not want to rock the boat here. And there's an FT article where that I don't have it up right now, but they cite like 7 sources saying that like China has never issued such strong warnings saying don't do this. And the US government is trying to say we don't control Congress. Like that's their fallback. Even though Biden as the president is, nominally the head of the party, like Pelosi is clearly, like if I would imagine that like if Biden wanted to stop her going, he could. Why he's not, I mean, it's because, and this is where it gets to answer your question, like why would she do this kind of thing and why would she be allowed to go? It's because there is at this very moment, like internationally, like a very kind of large, I guess like there's a political alignment, like taking place, realignment of some sort, like it's you have like this position
Wait,
of
I can't hear
yeah.
you. Chat can probably hear you, but sometimes Discord cuts out the audio. What can you
Oh.
repeat what you just said? Sorry.
Yeah. No, just that like we're in this moment where like, there's a realignment, and part of the way that we're going to get ourselves out of this, like, like with the high prices, whether, energy costs, the green transition, et cetera, is clearly going to be like a defense spend up. The trajectory is really the trajectory of policy at the moment is clearly orienting us toward war or defense spending.
No, definitely.
It's a very dangerous game.
I think aggressively engaging with like the world's largest commodities producer that we definitely rely on is the best thing you can do in an effort to combat inflation. I mean, it's just, I personally think that's a fucking psychotic perspective, but who knows? I mean, we're having a hard time fucking building micro semiconductor facilities like that make microchips on U.S. soil. Meanwhile, Nancy Pelosi's trying to go to fucking Taiwan. I mean, who knows what China could do in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like there's the Biden administration has sort of been like they've adopted a lot of the so for example in the Trump years they passed like a one of those acts that's like the Taiwan Happy Fun Time Act or whatever, something with like a very generic title that is to say that like we encourage and want to promote that U.S. government officials can go to Taiwan in their capacity as U.S. government officials. But Tillerson said at the time of that policy's introduction, we still have our policy is one China and all that. And so, this idea of having our cake and eating it too, on being able to have, this sort of like, we're going to continue to, develop like a, what looks to the world like a client state, industrial relationship or patronage with Taiwan. I just think like it'll, the prospect of war has always been a very serious, restraining device. And look, like, as much as people like the Soviet Cold War with the U.S. was like there was an East trading bloc.
I'm losing you again. I know Chad can hear you, but you said
it's all good.
War is a restraining device.
Yeah, like war is like a restraining device, but like in the Soviet Union days, the Eastern trading bloc was its own thing. It was like it was an attempt to be autarchical, to be self-sustaining. But then the like with China, like globalization has meant that like the U.S. is embedded in China, and that China is like it's meaning that like there's if the U.S. really does, which is to say that like
Chad
the U.S. does want to like
I just can't. I don't know why. It's just so fucking whack. I'm gonna turn this off and on again. Maybe it'll fix it. Sorry.
You can also cut. I mean, maybe just like cut the share screen, or I'll cut that. Hold up, that's my end.
Yeah. Maybe that's the reason. I don't know. Sometimes it happens. It's very weird where like Discord is just like whack and chat can hear you as in like the audio is being fed. to the stream for some reason so they can hear everything you're saying. I just can't.
Yeah. No, so it's like, which is all to say that, like, it's not to say that, like, oh, there's no conflict that's going to happen. Everything's fine. It's only to say that, if the U.S. wants to confront something like a big and amazing opportunity and a challenge like the green transition, if the U.S. wants to do it without China, like, that is going to and it seems like that's the decision tree that the U.S. is embarking upon, like, that's a bad future. That's a scary future. But I wouldn't, like, I don't have like cataclysm fears. Like, I don't think that China is going to, like, I don't think that the nukes are about to start flying anymore because of this necessarily. It's just a really scary reminder about like the trajectory things are on.
Yeah. Fuck. I mean, Taiwan is in many ways no different than any other right-wing client state of the CIA that is being used as a cudgel or a way to consistently saber rattle against foreign adversaries. That doesn't mean that the entirety of their politics is right-wing, but like their ultimate inception is one that was anti-communist. For those of you who don't know, now Blowback season 3 is not about not about how Taiwan came to be, but you can elaborate on that as well if you want to add a little bit. But the Taiwanese government is literally more progressive than the current CCP. What I'm talking about is with respect to like the original inception. I don't know why you guys are saying like it's more more progressive than the current CCP. Maybe.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the origin story is basically that, like, after the Chinese Civil War, so basically this actually is a pretty important, and we address this point in our podcast. And I think it's a good way an important thing to understand about this. There's one very credible school of thought that suggests that the Korean War happened in order to prevent the United States, in order to prevent Mao from reclaiming Taiwan for mainland China, for the communist government. And there's there's some diplomatic like evidence, we could say, that suggests this position, and the timing of the war very much suggests that. But the basic, the gist of it is that in 1949, once Mao wins the Chinese Civil War, these ragtag communists who've been waiting like a decades-long civil war in horrible conditions, they win, and they have this really daunting task ahead of them with this agrarian peasant population. Chiang Kai-shek, the Generalissimo, and the Kuomintang, the political party around him, they flee to Taiwan. And the putting oneself in the mindset from like 1950, these things that come about, like in 1953, the armistice in Korea, and then in Taiwan, the creation of the state. I think what I guess the way to put it is that like there was this sense that they were temporary. They were not something that were going to last as long as they have. Say like the Israeli occupation of the West Bank, which was which was sort of developed as kind of exceptional circumstance. But when viewed against like the 1,000-year history of China, for example, or the last 1,000 years of indigenous Palestinian settlement in the West Bank, it is this fairly recent phenomenon. And so it becomes this like, all right, the U.S. has through the power of its world hegemony been able to sustain this reality for the last 70 years. And it seems right now that like that part is it's cracking, but like it's all it's all very much interconnected. Like Taiwan was created as part of like a political reality 7 years ago in which the U.S. was working to fight world communism, and now that like the supply chain is no longer all about like getting oil to places and restricting access to oil, but is instead will become about a much different supply chain and solar and EVs and all this other kind of shit. Like the bargaining position is different, and all of a sudden something like Taiwan with TSMC, this massive semiconductor company. I mean, like the idea of whether it's China invades or demands a different kind of relationship and gets it. I mean, it's like a war like we're seeing in Ukraine, right? Like one development, like a limited war. But on the other hand, I think that like there are measures even short of limited war. Like the U.S. has perfected economic warfare with sanctions against like half the globe. Like it's there may
Yeah.
be measures that we don't quite see in terms of like how this violence or conflict evolves that we can't anticipate. Hold on to your butts, I guess.
Yeah. But I just keep like I understand why the United States would send an emissary, okay, to spark this kind of global conflict.
Oh, sorry.
In a historically like right wing anti-communist CIA client state. I just don't understand why it's Nancy Pelosi that's doing it. But I guess like someone's got to do it. Good for her, Queen. It would be chill. I mean, it would be the funniest thing if the PLA shot down her flight. I mean, it like arguably it would be kind of funny.
I mean, it would listen, like the 20th, you can tell a certain kind of like story about the 20th century with like very spooky like plane incidents. There's like the one around Watergate where Howard Hunt's wife is like killed. And then there's Lockerbie, and there's KL flight I think 858, I forget, which admittedly I need to read more about, but like look, I think that like I hope Nancy Pelosi has a safe trip.
Yeah, no, me
I hope
too.
Nancy Pelosi
Like,
has a safe trip.
Yeah, no, I wish no ill will
I hope
upon
Nancy
anyone.
Pelosi has a safe trip.
Yeah, same. No ill will upon anybody. It's just like the funniest fucking thing that like Mrs. Insider Trading is like fucking
That would be my favorite.
going
If,
out
like,
the
it turns
bat.
out that she tacked on this because like Paul Pelosi has like some money tied up in a development thing. Like, believe me, I like nobody is rooting for that outcome to this harder than me. Like,
Yeah,
I would love that.
ride for Paul. I mean, drunk driving king. Okay, my man is like
Listen,
98 years old and
drunk
still driving
is just efficiency. You
Yeah.
cannot get to if you're having a drink and you need to drive. You can't do one after the other if you want to maximize your time.
Yeah,
It's as simple as
exactly,
that.
exactly.
Simple
Plus, many people are saying you can it calms your nerves.
Yeah, it
Have a
actually. I
couple
know a
drinks
lot of
before
people
getting
who have
behind the wheel.
anxiety, and drunk driving is really the only.
Yeah.
It's actually they drunk drive. They need to drink. They need
Yeah.
to drive drunk because they have anxiety.
You're being ableist when you, quite frankly, you're being ableist when you say Paul Pelosi should not be able to drunk drive.
I like a lot of people like to roast like tender queer types and other sensitive like younger generations for like responding too categorically about like the media they consume and so on, but like I think that like we should really look at the fierce attachments of boomers to like drunk driving and Weber
Yeah.
grills.
No, it's generational trauma. They have to do it. They know this is like this is brain breaking for them more than even like the recognition that trans people exist. You know what I mean? It's like first you start with by making drunk driving illegal. Okay, communist China came in and did that to us. They remember what they stole from us, right?
When I was in Brazil, like I learned there that basically you can have like 0.1 or something, like whatever the not point. I forget what the number is because I forget how BAC
In
works,
America,
but, like,
it's 0.08.
okay, like they have like the minimum where it's functionally like if you have a drink, you're fucked. Like the whole like they're super draconian about it. It was really like
Yeah,
it was
communist
really.
Brazil.
I mean, I do like listen like. It's a really intense way to enforce it. I'll say that it does make It does make dinner pretty tense for the designated driver without even like without like a like a friend beer, or like a designated driver beer.
Fucked up.
It's a great
Actually
beer.
fucked up. But yeah,
It's
we're
really
big
screwed up.
we're big time Paul Pelosi boys. I mean, obviously he's just on his Sigma grind set. Keep making incredible fucking plays in the stock market. I think everyone's just jealous. Straight up.
I mean, they are, but like, wait, are there still people who are like? I remember somebody made like a Paul Pelosi like ETF or something where they were like, you could have your portfolio track Paul's, which I think is amazing.
Yeah.
Like meme stocks are cringe, but that one's funny.
Yeah, no, they follow his they follow his trades, and I think that everyone, it's like Andrew Tate. You know what I mean? You gotta expand. You got to expand your network. Everyone's on the come up. Everyone's going to the moon. Someone in the chat says, by the way, the modern
what is
KMT.
his thing, by the way?
What?
Who is he? I mean, I know you went through it just a bit ago, but like he's just another guy like with bad opinions.
He's just like I feel like he's Jordan Peterson, but like not openly. Like he doesn't look as
MMA
beta.
Jordan Peterson.
He's MMA Jordan Peterson. He's like Jordan Peterson with CTE, and he like looks like Jordan Peterson on steroids, basically. Like he presents himself in a certain way where he's not using like, $2 words. He's just like much more appealing.
in the octagon, bitch.
Yeah, exactly. He's like way more appealing to like disillusioned, rudderless
like his
young
his
men.
body's not flaying and falling apart
Yeah.
because he only ate like raw filet mignon or raw like red meat for like 3 years.
Exactly.
Okay.
He like Andrew Tate, for all of his faults and failures, would not get owned by fucking apple cider. Okay. But yeah, someone in the chat was saying, by the way, the modern KMT is now the pro-China, pro-unification party, while the nominally liberal DPP, who were persecuted by the KMT for being communist fellow travelers, is now doing some Red Scare propaganda. How the tables have turned.
True.
So,
very true.
So the
very
thing
true.
about that, yeah, I was gonna say like the thing that American media gets, I think, purposely wrong about like the Taiwanese approach to independence from China is that the current like two-state, or one-state, two systems approach, the one that America currently has, is also the one that China currently has as well. For the most part, it's not something that, like, I think, at least as far as I know, looking at as many polls on this as possible, from what I understand, and I might be completely wrong, but from what I understand, they just don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to instigate. They don't want like they don't want China to come in and take over, but they also don't. What's up?
Like think about it from like their, I would tell people to like think about it from like their perspective. It's like, yeah, a lot of them have relatives in mainland China. A lot of them, like they're like, it's in the same way with Korea, where it's like, yeah, North Korea and South Korea, they don't want to go to war. They would like to like, be able to engage with like, their like family. Like I think that like, they want, I guess to me that's part of, the one of the things that feels really kind of difficult about this, or at least like, one of the things that's frustrating to in consuming this is like American media is just the, like the sense that like that these people in those places that like they don't care and have like an affiliation for one another, like that's one of the ways that you do know that this is like, yeah, it's a settler colonial country, because we don't look at our neighbors in our countries and see like an affinity or see like like a longing to like have peace or some kind of positive mutual relationship. We just see like new markets and new frontiers, whereas for a lot of the people in these regions, even if politically they don't agree, they're not my politics, but like what they want is to like as they would see it, like have history resume its course. And yeah, that to me, that just like it just feels very whereas like it's like everybody's playing like a horrifyingly stupid like 5 IQ game of Risk on MSNBC or whatever. It's nauseating.
Yeah, but new wars, new frontiers imply more opportunities to make money, more clicks, more articles. Article heads are going to be thriving. So I get why they're doing it. I mean, I get why.
Listen, I'm about clicks. People are always, I think that they don't quite, like I don't think that they like I think that clicks get a bad rep, but I'm really actually about them. And I
that's
You see, I was just talking about affinity and like stuff that people from places have,
is the
and it's like we're literally both from there.
bro.
And
At
here
least
you
it's not
are
on your
just, like,
fucking side. You know what I mean? But like every dude at the gym, that wears a cut.
Well, that's
cut
true, but here's
sleeve
the thing,
shirt.
man. Here's the thing. I got this while I was living in California, and at the time, I didn't think that I was going to be going back to Jersey that
You
soon.
fucking felt
which-
proud about that? You were like, I need to
Yeah,
show my
man. Have you ever
Jersey
been?
pride.
Yeah, I mean, like, have you ever been to California? You live in LA. Yes, I'm like, I'm from a place where I don't know, people look like people. What do you want me to say?
Oh, Jesus Christ, dude. Okay, so do you have any other Nancy Pelosi insider information, or
I
is
mean,
you
her
want-
district is very Asian, which I think people, kind of discount at their, like peril. A lot of the, like a lot of the reason that she's being hawkish now, and the reason I wanted to like read aloud a bit from that, old article from the LA Times in '92 is because like she really has believed for 30 years that China fucking sucks. And that like the PRC is bad, and that the opening of trade relations between China and the West was bad because it legitimated a Nazi-like government. And so she has consistently maintained that position for 30 years. And guess what? Now, American interests, as American elites conceive it, are aligning in a way that promotes conflict with China. And the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, who has a predilection for getting attention for doing useless shit and for taking, trips to, abroad and meet with heads of state and so on, she sees an opening to, advance a set of ideas that, she clearly believes in. I think that, I mean, it's like that she's doing it against the will of the Biden administration is like, Dark Brandon is sort of revealing himself to be like the darkness is in the passivity. It's in the, it's in the fact that he's checked out. It's like it's the darkness is that he's leaving the light off rather than trying to, turn it on. And so like, so somebody like Nancy Pelosi, who, under Obama, he would
Can
have been
take
like,
advantage of
let me
that.
be clear, like, shut up.
Yeah. Yeah, Obama would want Nancy Pelosi to go on an apology tour. That's what
I
Obama
mean, because
would
I
want.
think he was much more savvy, or at least his administration was, about like preserving the bag, so to speak.
Yeah. So I guess I mean, I don't know how this is going to turn out, but what I do know is I'm fairly certain that Taiwan is not going to take over mainland China. So
It sounds like somebody doesn't believe in miracles.
yeah, it's kind of. I mean, listen, rise and grind. I'm on that grind set. Taiwanese grind set. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
true. Actually, all right. Listen, here's 5 steps. Like, all right. I'm putting on my Gary V hat right now. I'm being Gary V. All right. If Taiwan wants to take over the mainland China, you got to do these 5 things. All right. You got to buy Bitcoin. Okay. And then you got to subscribe to 5 Patreons, and then read 5 books,
Yeah.
and then take 5 pictures, and then learn a language. Boom.
yeah.
Boom.
There
If you
you
do
go.
these 5 things, you'll take over mainland China. Easy. Boom. Hashtag Gary V.
People didn't even understand what I was saying because like most people have no understanding of like Chinese history, and don't recognize that is like the original goal, and still I guess somewhat current goal that is never going to be achieved, obviously, of at least some Taiwanese people.
It's also like, the John Birch Society, something that we talk about in this season a bit, like literally like the racists of the American Cold War period. One of their co-founders was a bunch of their co-founders, and they were all very pro Chang, etc. But like, some of them were people who were doing Red Scare stuff. Like one of Chang's like business partners and patrons, a guy named Alfred Kohlberg, was literally one of the financier and impresario behind the magazine that that was responsible for the first McCarthy era Red Scare Hollywood blacklist. Like, there's a way, it's all, I mean, that's part of what made making the blowback season so exciting, is that like you realize that this Taiwan issue and China more broadly is, it's a very, I mean, Americans, I think, are now, because of the realities of geopolitics, coming to engage with it. But like, it's a very it's a history that is quite. I mean, there's a lot of meaning in it. There's a lot that was we are now contending with because of these decisions made then, and the political networks and affiliations, especially on the right. I mean, they were the seeds of the industrial regime, and trade policy, architecture that we have now that sucks dick horribly and is immiserates the world and imprisons us in this easy bake oven of poverty that we call Earth.
That was brilliant. Well, Noah, you have a wonderful voice that people can listen to for hours on end. Specifically,
Yeah, well,
on
listen, it's
numerous, specifically
have
on
me
numerous
come on and read the
platforms.
dictionary next.
Yeah. Well, I was just about to say specifically on numerous platforms where you can get podcasts, right? Blowback.
Yes. So if you wanna, if people want to listen to Blowback right now, you pay $25 for it's an annual charge, and you get the whole new season, all 20 episodes. This includes interviews with like interviews covering everything from biological and germ warfare to 2-part episodes about the history of the Korean War with the most eminent historians of the Korean War, as well as Korean activists in their own words. And this also, in addition to getting you 20 episodes all at once, it gives you an ad-free archive of the first 2 seasons. And so
yeah,
there is lastly also a soundtrack. And so if you search The Great Vorelli with a V, Vorelli on your platforms, and search the Blue House album, that's Brendan's original score, and it bangs. And if you want to wait, that's okay. Fuck you, as Brendan would have me say, but that's okay. And if you want to get the podcast, we love you and really support you for it. People being able to listen to it now, and the people who are getting to binge it, like they're able to really help us keep making it, year after year, as this heretofore independent project.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, and if you want to listen to the past seasons, you can just get it on all of your podcast apps. They're all all the episodes of first and second seasons are there.
What would you say is the biggest before I move on outside of like the Nancy Pelosi stuff and we move on to some other things as I eat my Chipotle lunch and have you leave. I don't want to take too much time from your day. What would you say are some of the biggest misconceptions about the DPRK, specifically from its inception, that Americans are unaware of?
So the first one here's I think an emblematic fact.
Yeah.
It was basically official American government policy, and it was reported as fact in the New York Times and other newspapers that Kim Il-sung, the founding leader of North Korea and the hero of the war against Japanese colonization, that Kim Il-sung was actually an imposter, and that the leader in North Korea was a man who had taken the identity of Kim Il-sung. And he, is like this whole imposter thing is obviously
Cope.
bullshit, but
it seems like a lot of cope.
I mean, it's extreme. It's crazy. Like they're, they wanted to they had to sort of deal with the fact that there was this, popular uprising. And Kim was a credible, he was a credible leader, and the North Korean
he had some fail sons. For sure.
The North Korea has followed along a path of development that was a future that I think you could just maybe this goes to your question about what's the big misconception or some big ones, but the biggest one of all is that we don't control North Korea's fate. North Korea got a bomb because we created a set of conditions so that they would have to pursue it in order to pursue their advantage. And I think that there's a real when you even go further back and look at how the country has degenerated and so on, talk about continuity between seasons for Blowback. This was a country that at one point, for many decades was better off than South Korea. Hard as that may be for people to believe now. But then in the 1990s,
you're about to shock people with that. A lot of people are going to get mad at you for saying that.
Industrialization is, it had been this, force that had helped, the Stalin breakneck industrialization had helped, North Korea develop and achieve that. But then, the collapse of the Soviet bloc was a huge drag. There was also, and that took place. The Soviet collapse took place in the context of another global economic, crisis. And then there were famines and flood. And these, North Korea has not really recovered since, all the while sanctions have only intensified. And the sanctions regime, I mean, like, it's enforced in policy, obviously, in explicit ways. And, sure, if you were to put North Korea in Venmo or something, it would be like a huge pain in the ass. However, it's also, enforced in softer ways where, like, the New York Times will have multiple investigative reporters and visual, graphics people do an investigation about how North Korea is getting its illegal oil. And how it's, like, we can see with satellite imagery, we can see how North Korea is getting this oil against sanctions. And that oil, by the way,
Unacceptable.
oil. Did you know that you can use oil for weapons? Because if you use oil for, I mean, like, yes, you can use it for electricity and, tractors and iPhones and, like running water and stuff. Yeah, but it's also the weapons, And so, that is the story that is presented in, like the New York Times as well. So there's just like this, to the extent that North Korea can be called a hermit kingdom, which again, like, racist, like, to the extent that is credible, it's because we made it so. And that to me is, like, our show is sort of an attempt to try and sketch out how, like, the North Korea, the Korean War was, like, the origin point in many respects for how that happened.
Are you
for
saying
how that
that
evolved.
Wait a minute. Are you saying that the DPRK is not abiding by the principles of self-reliance, which is at the heart of Jusha, the immortal science of Marxist-Leninist Jushaism?
I think that, like,
it's actually American blockades, like inhumane sanctions against North Korea that has kept it the way that it is.
I mean, it is a very, like, it is interesting. I guess, like, I try not to comment too much on the ideological components because it's just like I don't know, like, I don't want to get out. I don't, like, it would feel out of pocket to say the least. However, it does.
You don't want to offend. You don't want to offend the.
Well, I mean, look, it's like, to me, the thing that feels more interesting as like a phenomenon is like that so many people on the internet are interested, and I think this is a good thing, by the way. I don't think this is a negative thing at all. Like, they're interested in, like, Jusha ideology as like a way of, like, what was this idea, like, set of ideas developed in response to? Why do these ideas exist? And that to me is really, like, I think that's a great set of questions to ask about anything. And, I, like, to the extent that, like, we're able to, what I would hope is that, like, if we're able to provide, because really the Korean War, like, we're telling a story that ultimately precedes, like, the actual, the formation of the North Korean state as a non-wartime entity. And then we really only kind of tell, like, some of the stories since then. Brendan did some really good bonus interviews on this, but a lot of, what we're really trying to sort of, obviously, compel to our audience is just that, the American government, has made it such that North Koreans, like, suffer tremendously, and we genocided that country. That's not that shouldn't be a controversial.
What is it? 40 to 90% of all buildings were reduced to rubble in every city, and above the was it 38th parallel?
Yeah, I mean, North Korean society went underground, and this was also, and also, by the way, like, the Korean War. And this is part of what I think is so important about looking at events like this and spectacles, these horrible things, because you find no event is isolated. Everything comes from something. Everything is generated by something that came before it. And in the case of Korea, you also go back to 1945 and you see that the napalm that was pioneered in Korea and then used later in Vietnam had actually been used on Japan. And so that the American campaign at the end of World War II on Japan to inflict as much misery as possible to make sure that the Americans were the ones who actually got Japanese dominion and not the Soviets, especially after FDR dies. I mean, these firebombing campaigns, I think you find that actually the World War II was not such a good world. It was not such a good war. It was not such a, we may remember it as a good war because we helped to defeat the Nazis. But, like, we did things in the cause of slaying Japanese imperialism that were, are just like are hard to defend as plausibly being in the interest of either Japanese subjects of imperialism or let alone colonial subjects of Japanese imperialism,
or rebuilding Japan in our image, in our perfect image of what Japan should look like, or keeping our finger on the pulse in with respect to, like, the redevelopment of Japanese society. Specifically, one of the things that you mentioned, but I guess you don't really go too far into it, but, like, one of the things you talk about is germ warfare, the potential of using germ warfare, which of course directly ties back to our involvement with post-World War II Japan. Yes. And what the
we do go into it in the show. We made a point. We do go into it, like, if, in the same way that, like, if you're going to do a story about the Cuban Revolution and you don't end up talking about the assassination of JFK, you're kind of a wimp, in my view. At least as an American, in Korea, I think, like, you've got to, especially as, like, a leftist, you've got to really take seriously what the, quote unquote allegations are. And I think that what's really amazing about the, bacteriological and germ warfare allegations is that, the evidence that, researchers like Jeff Kay, whom we interviewed, and this guy named, Thomas Powell, who's written some great articles, and whose father was prosecuted by the federal government for reporting from China about the allegations of that the U.S. had sent a quote unquote bubonic plague ship to a harbor next to Korea.
How
And
could they have
so,
gotten such advanced research on germ warfare, Noah? Is there
well, they
is there
decided
perhaps
that
like a unit that was in?
a certain Japanese scientist / military officer named Shiro Ishii and hundreds of his colleagues in Unit 731 were made high priority research.
Huh.
They were effectively, they were research subjects squared. They had a lot of research that was valuable to the Americans, and they themselves were fonts of information for the Americans' own tactics. And so in 1945, as these programs end up, developing in Japan, they were a very serious focus. And there's evidence that the Japanese used them against against Koreans and against Chinese communists, in Manchuria.
Manchuria.
You now have this, kind of, I mean, by the time the Korean War breaks out, you have a bunch of experts who have previously fought the Koreans using these tactics. You have the American Air Force is really the dominant force that is running the Korean War. Like, they're not running the Korean War in the sense that they're not, like, making all the decisions about the long-term conduct of the war, but they're running the war in the sense that, like, the Korean War was just like a gigantic bombing run. Like, yes, there was a ground war, but, like, we were just throwing, we threw more munitions at Korea during the course of the war than we did in the Pacific theater of World War II. And we are developing, we're relying on the Air Force. And what Jeff Kay, this researcher whom we interviewed, has sort of shown, and what Thomas Powell, whom we've interviewed, has also described, is that, in the fall of 1950, as there is this strategic retreat by the U.S. Forces from the UN forces, because the Soviet Union had been boycotting the UN, so the U.S. was able to, get because they were boycotting the UN because the UN wouldn't admit communist China as the official representative of China. So the U.S. got to call its force the UN, and there were other nations such as Australia and Britain that were committed to this. But I digress. So, the U.S. is beginning this retreat. They're in the fall of 1950. And there is it's a very, scary, and dramatic and perilous time for the UN forces as they report it, saying that there is, like, we're going to, I mean, like the South Korea is going to get overrun. They're going to, take us all back, etc. And you also have, during this time, reports coming out at different places in, in different towns around, in Korea, smallpox, something that's never been seen in Asia, breaks out. You also have in addition to, say, like, the smallpox breaking out, infected chicken feathers are seen as a vector of, bacteriological and germ warfare, which had been, as one person we've interviewed describes, like, the hobby horse method of disseminating microbiological, vectors of Shiro Ishii. And then you find all of this, like, if you want to describe, let's say, if you wanted to get me so that I wouldn't be saying, like, alleged over and over again with this stuff, it's because, the developing, like, an operational portrait of this stuff, like developing an idea of how it would have all worked, it requires a lot of stuff that, like, these guys are really good at destroying. In 1974, when they were updating the Freedom of Information Act, right before a bunch of relevant documents would have been declassified, the Joint Chiefs destroyed executive record meeting minutes from, like, 25 consecutive years or something.
Also,
So,
here's what's not alleged.
yeah.
I mean, you already briefly touched on it, but, like, American forces' involvement with the people, like you already mentioned, that were involved heavily with Unit 731, including, like, relatives of Shinzo Abe. And the lack of prosecution, or rather, even after they had apprehended some of these war criminals, in the aftermath of World War II, they completely fucking, they very openly communicated with them, and in an effort to get all of that important research in germ warfare, in the genocidal endeavors that they engaged in Manchuria and in Korea, that they would offer them conditional release, which is exactly what happened. That is exactly what happened.
And they also, and we
And
did
you
got to
use that info somewhere.
Europe.
Like, why
I
did
mean,
you
we,
care about getting that knowledge if you're not going to use it?
Well, and that's a very good point. And also, here's the other important thing: is that and this is where maybe I think this is actually probably kind of a good note to leave the stream on. But basically, the germ warfare program and the allegations of germ warfare are popularly remembered as being part of like the MK Ultra story. That is the CIA efforts into government like mind control and lethal assassination, and also non-lethal chemistry. And that's because there were about 24 pilots who had claimed in they were broadcast over Beijing radio in 1952, saying that they had dropped they dropped weapons, they dropped germ bombs.
Well,
And
that was mind control.
Yeah, and they also said, and then the Chinese, there were further propaganda reels put out of them. But the U.S. had to come up with an explanation, for not just this, but also for why American POWs were not, like for one thing, I guess, for why they weren't being treated so cruelly in North Korean POW camps, while about 170,000 Koreans were languishing, rioting, in horrible disease-ridden poverty in, American-administered POW camps in South Korea. And so, the brainwashing story ends up becoming this, like, well, when those flyers gets back, who's the first person that, debriefs a bunch of them and, interviews them, is Dr. Jolly West, who is this essential figure in MK Ultra. You also have there's just really, like, I think quite at like every all these different links, the idea of trying to find an explanation for why would good old American boys allege these things is also wrapped up in these notions that like the Chinese and North Koreans were doing things to our brains. I mean, I think if the people watching this haven't seen The Manchurian Candidate, I mean, it's like 5-star perfect movie about like how crazy this phenomenon was. Like, actually, I have here. Wait, give me a second. Yeah, this is from like 1960. Here's like a Life magazine article. So this is years after the Korean War, but like brainwashing, the use of hypnosis to cure mental ills and all this, like and that, because it does end up talking about a lot of these details. I mean, there was a mania for it, because again, you have to remember, like, states were going commie, constantly, and people needed to have an explanation for why that was happening. And brainwashing, this rhetorical weapon that comes out of the Korean War, went a long way to explaining that.
For the record, TrueAnon did an episode on the other side of hypnosis as well, with respect to who was the guy that like who was one of those like people who tried to do an assassination or did an assassination successfully? It wasn't Hinckley.
I mean,
Sirhan.
Oh yeah. I mean, I will confess that like I don't know as much. I mean, like I've listened, like,
and I don't believe in hypnosis, for the record. I don't think that that's like a real thing. I think you can like probably manipulate people, especially people who are like mentally, not very sound. And I do think that goes on, but I don't think you're doing actual hypnosis.
I mean, it's like to me, what's less interesting is because I'm not a science guy, and I'm also not a psychology guy, and like, to me, the more interesting questions are always around like, the ways in which we're able to show that like the ideas that people who do believe in these things so concretely, like the way that they want to move through the world and like raise money and fund and develop institutions and projects that reflect this, like it's like I mean, crypto is probably like a great public facing example of how a whole lot of very wealthy people with like a really aggressive vision of how the world can work can try and manifest something. I mean, I think hypnosis is probably realer than crypto, at least based on what I've seen on YouTube videos and like some selectively edited TikToks. But I mean, there's like a real, I think, kind of it's to me one of the really interesting things about when you do look into these like weird spooky margins or whatever is just like you have to like I guess kind of ask yourself like what seems a little far fetched, what doesn't, or something, and it's part of the fun is weighing that and finding evidence to substantiate one opinion or another, and figuring out like why is this evidence of anything in one direction or another. Think for yourselves.
Yeah. Well, not very based note to end it on, Noah, saying crypto is not real when crypto theft is one of the one of the few meaningful ways that North Korea can continue making money. Kind of fucked up of you.
Look, it's if it turns out that like North Korea ends up like sustaining like an economic rejuvenation on the backs of Mark Andreessen, I say go for it.
Same.
Bro, thank you for having me. This has been awesome.
Thank you for coming on. Wonderful. Everybody, Blowback Season 3 is out right now.
Blowback Season 3, blowback.supportingcast.fm. Thank you for, being a good stream.
Thanks for coming on, man.
I don't know what you say to these people. I mean, like, I'm grateful that they're paying attention.
Yeah. All right, peace, brother.
All right, peace out.
Noah is one of the oldest guests I've ever had, and not by like age, I mean. We used to play Fortnite together back in my fucking PS4 days, alongside like Felix Biederman as well. But yeah, that was a great guest. Noah is brilliant, wonderful, very intelligent, and they have cultivated a diehard fan base for Blowback, which deserves it. Honestly, they're fucking great. So